And you don't wanna change it now. Work for me, rearrange your style. Should've never been allowed to get all your fake gangsters out. We shut it down at the enemy. LA, make some noise if you feeling me. I was working in a record shop right outside the city, Street Corner Music. That was like the first platform I had at retail for selling records. And Jay came in one day and he was just digging and going through records, and we struck up a conversation and he got to talking. This was right before like all the Tribe shit went down. Like it was kind of in negotiations about him putting the work in for them. And he played me some shit. He's driving a white Ford Ranger and he put a tape in and I was like, wow. Yeah, this is what's up right here.
I first found out about him through House Shoes. I put out a record called Peanut Butter Breaks in 1994, and House Shoes was working at a record store, and I was sending the records to him, and he was like, "Oh, you got to hear my man Dilla." You know, he was really holding the torch for this guy who I'd never heard of, you know, didn't have anything out, and he was just really proud of him that it was this guy from Detroit that was making music, you know, that's so powerful.
They came through with the Fantastic Volume 1 cassettes, brought me like 20 of them, and the spot would be greasy at times, like, you know, there'd be backdoor shit going on, and what I would usually do is, if it was somebody that I really wanted to have it, I'd just slide it in the bag, and then, you know, when it comes time to take it to consignment, oh look, all 20 tapes are gone, you're getting paid for them anyway. So these cats from Manhattan Records were in town, which at that time Manhattan Records in Japan was like the biggest record store in the world. And we were chopping it up and I gave them the tape, and from that handoff, you know, that's how the Fantastic, I don't know, 12-inch came about.
I went to Japan. I was on tour with the Visionaries. Babu and myself were going record shopping, and we happened to go to Manhattan Records, and they would do a lot of exclusive stuff from the United States that only sell in Japan. The buyer at the time, the hip-hop buyer at the time, his name was Toshi. Toshi says, "Yo, you know, ever heard of J D?" He said, "Yeah, you know, like, you know, he has a group called Slum Village." It's like, ah. So he plays the record. First thing he played was "I Don't Know," and we were like, Babu and I were like bugging the hell out, like how he would flip, how he used James Brown with the song, you know, "I don't know, T 3 1 2," you know, like just you're playing and stuff. Personally, I bought like at least about 15 or 20, bring back home with me. I pretty much hooked up the crew with the vinyl and stuff, and then the junkies were the pretty much the ones that broke Slum Village in LA.
For some reason, they just took to it out here. Toronto and Los Angeles were like the first two markets outside of Detroit that really got on it, and that's because they're, like I said, hip-hop wise, LA has always been way ahead, you know, with like Freestyle Fellowship and Blow, just like lyrically way ahead of the game. And in Toronto, they just love good hip-hop.
The production on all the early Slum Village stuff just immediately grabbed my attention. It was like, what the hell is this? You know, this is like a dream come true for hip-hop music.
My boy Jake One, he used to always give me Dilla stuff. He had a link, I don't know who his link was, like House Shoes and a couple other people, but back then, like 96, 95, early 97, there was already a community of Dilla heads. Like, you know, there was already people, yo, I got this dude JD's new beat tape, or I got his new demo, or, you know, so that stuff was already floating around.
Like that's how Dilla would shop beats, is he would make beat tapes, you know, not too dissimilar to what Donuts is, you know, like you know, a compilation of minute-long ideas, musical ideas that could be turned into songs. And so Jay got his hands on a bunch of the ones from I guess it would have been the early 2000s or the late 90s.
I told Madlib I had one, and he just like, yo, you got a what? So I dubbed it for him, and he just went and made a bunch of songs over those beats.
Madlib got a hold of a lot of Dilla tapes and started rapping over Dilla's beats. And we came up with this idea, because I was working on a mixtape, and this is before Serato, and I came up with the idea to do like a vinyl so that I can like mix and scratch with it. And I put one song of theirs on it, and we did like 200 copies or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I remember hearing some of the first results, like the Stereo Lab chop, and the one that Busta Rhymes rapped over subsequently, and just being blown away. Just hearing Madlib. I mean, Madlib's a great MC, but you know, just like Dilla, you know, like two really good MCs, but not always rapping. You know what I mean? More making beats. But hearing Madlib over Dilla sounded real good.
We didn't even tell Dilla, actually, you know, when we did it. And Dilla called me up afterwards, and he's all, yo, what's up with that bootleg, man? And I wasn't sure if he was like, what's up, like I'm pissed off at you, or what's up, you know? And I was like, oh, yeah, you know, because I'm doing this mix, and I needed the song. And he was like, yo, man, let's do some shit like that, but official. So we came up with the idea of Madlib rapping over Dilla beats for half the album, and Dilla rapping over Madlib beats for the other half.
Now, I as a DJ, you know, was just waiting. Once I began to hear from Egon and Havana Joe about what was going on, and people were just talking about, oh yeah, you know, I just heard some stuff the other day. J Rock would talk about, you know, oh, I heard something, and man, it was crazy, and this and that. And I mean, it was exciting because the only thing that could happen was some sort of a meeting of the minds that would influence the two of them together.
Emotionally, they both speak from a similar kind of place. I think in their music, that's what makes them better, different than most of the other cats that touch a drum machine. You know, is that they're able to reach emotional places with their music that other cats don't get to.
He had sent like the 2002 batches, is 5 volumes with like 25 beats on each of them. He had sent them to Madlib. Get a knock on the door. UPS man shows up with an envelope. He opens it up, it's a CD, takes it out, puts it in, and it's like 15 songs. And we were trying to figure it out because he said that he sent Madlib the beat tapes like 3 or 4 days ago. So we were just trying to figure out how it was humanly possible for somebody to do that.
And when he was, you know, sending the stuff back and forth with Madlib, we didn't expect in any way that he was going to pick the beats that he picked.
So we were all sitting around in the basement, and we were listening to these beats, and I mean, it's Madlib beats, you know what I mean? Like, so there's some bangers on it, like it was some stuff on there that was just like, holy crap, like a lot of the stuff that ended up with on the J Lib record, you know what I mean? Like, bangers. I mean, Nasty Filth, while it was a good beat, it just wasn't one of the ones that immediately struck us like, ah! And for Dilla, I think a lot of times making records was about the challenge.
CD came back from Dilla in the FedEx, and I was like, Madlib, what the fuck? Why did he pick that? And I was like, you know, but it's dope, you know, and it was dope. It was like, you know, kind of like sends shivers down your spine dope, you know, like that he chose all those beats. And Madlib's picking all these beats that kind of referenced the Dilla that had made all the money, you know, revolutionizing commercial hip hop and neo soul or whatever, you know. But Dilla was there picking shit that didn't sound anything like the stuff he was, you know, known for making.
And then he started actually doing shows with us out of town, and that was another thing where, like, I never wanted to ask him to do shows because I knew even that back then his health was like off and on, you know. And he was like really like encouraging us, like that he was down to do the shows and stuff, and he was. I mean, we did a lot of shows with him before he moved to LA, you know, and they were all really special, and I think just that energy like kind of gave him the need to move here too.
Shit kind of went sour though, because you know, he had a flood that destroyed a lot of shit. So I've been a victim of like 3 or 4 floods. So when that happens, it's kind of like it never has that feeling that it had. You're like, damn, like my shit got destroyed. Like, let me get on some new shit.
So you think that's why he moved to LA?
That was probably one of the reasons.
Eventually, one day he just called me up and he's like, Wolf, I'm moving to LA. I was like, get the fuck out of here. I can't. You know, like I could not, because he was just always repping the D so hard, you know, and it was just such a part of him.
Dilla was synonymous with Detroit for all of us, and all of us kind of regarded him as a mythic figure, even though Wolf had, you know, of course, done some work with him. He put out those bootleg remixes when he was at TRC, and of course I'd met him, and you know, I think Madlib had even met him or something, but he was still like this mythic figure that was all Detroit, and you know, he would pop into these different cities, but you know, he was clearly Detroit.
you know, when you get older, you look for a certain type of vibe to do what you do. You know what I'm saying? Things got to be a certain way. And maybe Detroit just didn't have it for him anymore. He used it up.
According to Ma Dukes, I think he was kind of tired of Detroit. You know, Detroit was a real struggle for him. It was hard for him to stay there.
The Detroit shit'll wear you out. I mean, same thing. You know, I had to get out of there too. It can just kind of suck the life out of you.
And of all the times that I've been there, I think I've seen the sun once, you know? And it wasn't even for that long, you know? It's either snowing, raining, or overcast. Period. That's the D.
Cats get tired of that cold in the winter and the rain and all that shit, and they just want to get as far away as possible without leaving the country and come out here and just get the love that they never got in their own city. You know, I mean, musicians throughout the history, like way before hip hop, the same shit's been going on for a long time.
Whether you look at Marvin Gaye, the whole Motown scene, even before that, you go back to the era of cats like Paul Humphrey. But there's a railroad for musicians between Detroit and Los Angeles that's existed for many generations.
Well, Motown had offices in Detroit and LA. I mean, you know, come on now. You know, there's like the electro scene, you know, in LA was humongous. That's how hip hop started here, was via electro. There wasn't much disco rap being made in Los Angeles, right?
And you know, even what's big was over here where DJ used to do doubles, cut it up and stuff, was Cybertron. The song was called Clear. And a lot of people don't know that Cybertron is Juan Atkins, a famous Detroit techno producer.
They had the electro thing kind of going with the parallels to like Cybertron and Egyptian Lover. Like Juan Atkins and Egyptian Lover are good friends, and they were kind of making the similar music, even though geographically it's so far away. So, you know, there was that going on in the early 80s and mid 80s, and with Dilla and Madlib, you know, I think they kind of continued that tradition. I mean, I honestly think that Madlib was a big reason why he moved here, and you know, I never talked to him about it, and there's no way to confirm or deny that, but that's just like how I felt about it.
Dilla and Madlib had this, you know, energy that they shared, and it was obvious when they were doing the J-Lib project that the music they were sending back and forth was influencing the music that they were making. A lot of that was vocal performances, but you know, subtly you could hear it in the beats that Dilla would send through, you know, and the beats Madlib would send, you know, to Dilla. And one of the tracks on the J-Lib record that always struck me as something that was influenced by Madlib was that beat that Percy P rapped over for that interlude on the record. You know, chopped up drums, like, you know, super distorted vocal exclamations coming in and out. That reminded me of something, you know, that Madlib had influenced. And that interchange kicked into high gear when he moved to LA.
Him and that Madlib hung out a little bit more, got into each other's styles a little bit more.
Those guys are like, they're like cousins, you know. They're like almost mirror image of each other, you know. In some ways, yin and yang. Like Dilla's a little bit more outspoken than Madlib and stuff, but their spirits are the same. It's like it's. I even just remember just chilling in the back. I forgot what show it was, and we're chilling in the back. You hear Dilla go, yeah. And then you hear Madlib going, woo, just woo. You know, just one words, but they all communicate already exactly how, you know, they're just like, you know, they'd be like giving each other pounds and then just smoke and just like, laugh, you know, just, you don't have to have full conversation. It's almost like you watch them, they already know how, they already know what they're talking, you know, thinking already. You know, they're just like, you know, like it's funny.
I think they're both kind of, were aliens as far as like, they're just really out of this world. I mean, nobody makes music as well as they do. And I think Dilla felt like, wow, there's finally a guy that I can relate to. You know, it's like, I think when you're that talented, you get really lonely. Like, there's nobody else on earth that can relate to you. And they just, they just had that music bond that was like really strong.
I think mentally it just kind of freed his mind, you know? It's like it's a easier way, a better way of life out here compared to where we were. Like, you know what I'm saying? So, I think it just freed him up to be able to kind of think like, man, I can do whatever I want to do, even if I want to go back, because it was hard for him to go backwards. You know what I'm saying? Like, He likes staying ahead of the curve. But, you know, donuts was really loops and breaks.
You know, I think moving out here from Detroit and leaving the studio behind him, you know, like a very fine, beautiful studio with a very killer Pro Tools setup that he had built up over time, and taken a lot of that record company money and put it into the studio, and then leaving that behind, I think freed him up then to do the kind of work that he did when he was out here, which was much more like choppy, you know, sample oriented, just really about ideas.
He'd already done so much with so many different artists as far as defining the Dilla sound before that, that I think he was probably sick of it at that point, and he was ready to just change things enough that he was going to define a new era. And so, yeah, he moved here, he limited himself to just the bare basics as far as tools that he needed. I think he was playing around with, you know, an MPC. I think he had a Korg Electribe drum machine that he brought over to my house a couple times, and he was really excited about that. You know, turntables, just some basic sampling, and maybe a couple keyboards. By the time I had started working with him, which was J-Lib, he was already starting to go for a raw, you know, he kept on wanting to go for that raw sound, and that's what he talks about in Donuts and J-Lib and everything else, and everything was just more lo-fi, more hard-hitting, less point on the drums, less gating on everything and cleaning everything up. He wasn't really going for that at that point. It was let the noise bleed, let things sound, you know, damaged and more destroyed, and that was kind of where he was coming from at that point.
Yeah, he was just on, out here, he was just on a different phase, just on his loops. He was on chopping breaks and finding loops. He wasn't on his keyboard beats anymore. He wasn't on any of that. He was just on some straight hip hop, find the record, dig it out, let me chop it. You know, he was on that vibe at that time.
I know that for him, he was always on to the next. He didn't hold on to anything. You know what I'm saying? He kind of let it all go at some point. Like, you know, this batch of beats is cool. And I think it bothered him the most because people would call him about something he did 3 months ago. And he would be like, man, they want this old ass beat. I don't even want to fuck with this beat right now. It's like old to me. Like, because he had moved on 3 or 4 steps from where he was to where he, you know, where he was going in that time.
Get on one page and he would conquer that, and he would be satisfied, and then he would move on to the next, and he wouldn't look back. It was always no looking back with Jay. Like, I did that, I'm done with it. Let's go 5 years ahead.
You know, he was very good at knowing when he had played enough cards for one sound, and, you know, enough people were copying him at that point that it was time to switch it. And so he was trying new things out, and he wanted to go more lo-fi, muffly. I love that he kept saying that. More like a cassette, you know.
But, you know, at around that time, he'd put out the Rough Draft record. So he'd kind of made a statement, at least to, you know, the people that were paying attention to that vinyl-only release, that, you know, he was kind of taking a left turn.
But he's one of those dudes, you can take any record. I know Erykah Badu tells a story of, like, he would just say, like, pick any record, I'll make a beat out of it. And he was one of them dudes. Like, it was like, he needed the history of recorded sound, but within that, if it was a 29, it could be rare or it could be not that rare.
He took from all sources. I mean, he would take from techno records, you know, and he would take from like really obvious artists, but maybe a song that they didn't know, and then he would take from obscure stuff too. But I don't think he was like really like he would take from the Bee Gees or from whatever. It wasn't all about like, oh, it's got to only be something rare.
When Dilla grabbed that Stereolab beat, you know, I remember at the time, you know, B+ was the one hipping us to. He's like, man, you guys aren't listening to Stereolab? I'm like, man, that's the shit that the fucking kids at my college radio station listen to. Like, I'm playing boom bap hip hop, man, or funk. And he's like, you should check this out. And I was like, fuck, man, Stereolab? And, you know, Dilla was grabbing from, you know, much more current stuff than that, right? You know, like, so he was grabbing from everything, and Madlib was the same way. Like, I remember first time I saw like a Vincent Gallo record in Madlib's like to be sampled stack. I'm like, you're sampling Vincent Gallo? You know, but it all made sense because it's just like, you know, no boundaries, you know, that was just the way those guys worked.
One thing I did laugh about was him like, I gotta find this hand clap, and then go into the closet, and he had a record, he already knew exactly the record. Yeah, it's got a hand clap on it. And then sampled it up.
He thought like how you how you hear about Amadeus explained, you know, how he would just have everything mapped out in his head before he even composed a note on paper. Dilla was the same way. He had the whole thing mapped out in his head before he even got going. You know, we'd sit there for 15 minutes doing drops on a song, and it would just be, okay, right there, next bar, drop out the kit. Next 4 bars later, drop out the bass. Yep, right there, but bring it in right before the hi-hat. Yep, that's it. Move to the next 8 bars. He would just go through it like a railroad, man. He would just cut through it, and it was amazing watching him work because I could barely keep up with just the Pro Tools operating.
80 to 90% of all these joints that people have heard, 15 minutes. 15, 20 minutes tops. The first beat I ever saw him make was Get a Hold off of Beats, Rhymes, and Life. And that's when he was working in the back room at R.J. Rice's studio in Southfield. And it probably took him about 12 minutes to make. And he was getting frustrated. He was getting frustrated on the drums, like, damn. And he finally got him, and then just to chop the loop up and then put it on top took him like 2-3 minutes. You know what I'm saying?
Sometimes with the plugins and Pro Tools, things would get a little out of sync between my system and his system, because I had a TDM system and he had an LE system. This is kind of technical stuff, but you know, things would fall out of time because the plugins wouldn't be exactly the same between our systems. And he would be sitting on the couch and he'd be like, something fell out, and he'd go, you know, move the bass back 2 baby hairs, you know. And so I'd nudge the bass, and he'd be, that's good. Move the snare back 1 baby hair. Okay. Now the vocals, move them all back 3 baby hairs. I mean, I'm trying to interpret what baby hairs are, but I'm going ahead and doing it. Okay, what do you think of that? Yeah, cool. 1 more baby hair. Cool. He's like, that's it. And sure enough, you listen to it, and the whole beat, like, you know, it felt like a little crooked beforehand, before he got his hands on it and his ears on it. But by the time, you know, exactly 1 minute later, everything was time aligned without him having to sit at the board and do it himself, you know. But he just had crazy ears. He could sense timing very, very accurately and zero in on the stuff very quickly and fix it.
He was always like giving us beat tapes, and he was making kind of jokey names for them. One of them was like Pizza Man, and one was Donuts, and it was always like this unhealthy food and stuff. But Donuts was one of them, and I just remember it was me and Madlib and him in the car, and he was like, yeah, here's my new stuff, or whatever. You know, we were always like wanted to hear you, or I was always wanted to hear his and Madlib's stuff. And he played it, and I wasn't sure if it was like supposed to be a beat tape for rappers or what it was supposed to be, but it was, to me, it just sounded like the songs were full, finished songs. And I said, we should put this out like as it is, and he's like, I'm with it, you know.
Chris always said, you know, it's going to be a way for, you know, him to get his beats out there again, and, you know, people are going to realize that, yeah, he's sick, but, you know, he's not out for the count. You know, he's still making incredible beats because they're just getting shared around the internet, and no one really knows how great they are. We're going to master them, mix them, and all that. And he took that project really seriously. I mean, he was editing stuff in the hospital all the time. You know, he might have even made some of the beats there, but I kind of doubt it. You know, he had the portable turntable, and he had the 45s and all that. But I don't recall him ever sampling this stuff. I just remember him always with the laptop editing this stuff on Pro Tools. When he turned in that record, he gave me 2 CDs. I still have one of them. One of them I brought to production, one of them I kept at my house. And it's the original Donuts as he made it, because Jeff went and edited Donuts. That was, you know, a funny story in and of itself. But Jeff had to extend it because it was hella short. It was like 20 minutes long or something like that. And when I heard all of that together in the way that he actually wanted it to come out, I was like, fuck me, man. This last couple years has just completely flipped music on its head once again. Like, there's no way that anybody's going to know what to do with this. It was so astronomically different than everything that everybody had tried to do with that source material.
Donuts is like his most deceptive album because it sounds so simple and so easy. I mean, if you were just to listen to it at like the most basic level, it's you know, basically soul loops, you know. But if you were to go back and try to redo some of the stuff that he did, it's like there's so much more to it than meets the eye. And then, you know, he threw in all these amazing hidden messages in there, here and there, and it was so complicated and so complex and so well thought out, but it was still, you know, anybody could get down to it, you know.
When I first heard it, I think with a lot of us, you know, when I first heard it, I was like, man, this shit is crazy. It's real minimal, like just sticking to the records, kind of almost like edits of the original joints. But when he passed, you know, with a lot of us, the shit took on a whole new meaning. Like, was he really that nuts to, like, basically make a goodbye letter? You know, that shit is like saying goodbye.
For artists like this, you know, like death at the height of your powers is one of those things where it's like, you know, to find a full stop in the middle of the sentence is one of those things that just makes people think about things in a whole different way. And to put mortality into the mix in terms of your art, yeah, I mean, listen to Donuts, you know. Do you really think the dude didn't know what was going to happen? He fully knew what was going to happen.
So a lot of the original tracks that he sampled, if you listen to the lyrics and like the song titles, it's kind of like, it's really dark. Like, it's a lot of speaking of about death and even like the snippets that he put on top and the way he cut the records to make them sound like something else, like Jadakiss, cutting on Jadakiss and making it sound like he's saying, is death real? When he was saying, like, is that real? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's crazy. He consistently, like, with each project he ever produced, it would crack your head. Like, he's one of a kind. There's no one else that could basically, you know, say, I'm out of here. I know that my time has come, and I want to express that to you through this project.
Yeah, all these cats out here owe it to Dilla, dog. All these cats. I mean, they found their own niche now. A lot of these cats he's been gone for, you know, a couple years now. So it's like the teacher is gone, so you gotta find your own style still, you know what I mean? But when he was around, and if he was still around, motherfuckers would still be biting whatever new shit he would be doing right now.
While he was alive, he changed so many people's lives as it is, you know, like all my time with him, I always felt like I'm in the presence of a living legend.
I tell a lot of people the first time I heard Jay shit is pretty much just like the first time I heard hip hop. I was like, I don't need to listen to pop music or any of that shit on the radio. This is what I want to do.
LA certainly, like I said, had a reverence for Dilla that probably didn't exist in Detroit. I mean, I see it with Stone's Throw all the time. You know, we go do a gig in LA, and I'm not saying that it's bad, because we'll do great gigs in LA, but you show up in Paris and there's a line down the block, and I'm sure that, you know, Dilla saw a lot of that in LA when he first moved out. But the thing with Dilla in LA is that, you know, it persisted. It just never stopped. You know, like, people just had love for him wherever he went. But he was, you know, the great JD, and, you know, he decided to spend some time in this city with us, and, you know, we're all better for it.
Night of the Slips. The name of the game is light work.